A couple of years ago, when I was in college, I was trying to sell my old textbooks from the previous semester online. As a student, I really needed the money. I got a few offers, but they didn't work out, and I started to get worried because I had to sell the books quickly before new editions were released. Then one day, I got a message from someone saying they wanted to buy all my books. I thought they might be in the same program as me and needed the same books. Looking back, I realized I made a big mistake. At first, they suggested meeting at my place. I was desperate to sell the books, but I knew meeting a stranger at my place wasn't safe. So I said no and suggested meeting on campus instead. However, the person said they lived far away and asked if we could meet halfway. I thought they might be another broke student who couldn't afford much gas. So I agreed and picked a location that seemed safe and public. A gas station I knew well because a friend from high school worked there late shifts. I said we could meet any time between 12 o'clock to 3 p.m. since I had night classes to study for, and I didn't feel comfortable meeting strangers at night. On the day we planned to meet, the person sent me around 10 messages saying they couldn't make it during that time. I started studying for a big test we had in 2 days, but by 10 p.m., the buyer still hadn't shown up. Then I got another message asking if we could meet somewhere else, this time at an auto repair shop. I checked the map and saw it was only 10 minutes away, but I wasn't familiar with the area, which had a lot of one-way streets and alleys. It wasn't a good neighborhood, and I started to feel uneasy. When I arrived, I got another message telling me to meet in the back alley behind the shop. It was a one-way street, nighttime, and in a bad area. I told the person I needed to get back home soon, but they didn't reply until 10 minutes later, saying only almost there. By then, I was really angry and just wanted to leave. Then, a completely blacked out SUV drove up the street the wrong way. It had no headlights on, and all the windows were tinted so dark you could barely see inside. I felt terrified as 4 people wearing hoodies got out of the car. I panicked, trying to think of any way to get out of there. I couldn't go forward because their SUV was blocking the road, so I quickly reversed and got out as fast as I could. I glanced at them for a moment. They just stood there with their hoods covering their faces. I decided it wasn't worth risking my safety, so I left. From that experience, I learned to always bring someone with me next time. Never meet at night, and always choose a familiar place. I wanted to rent a small house in a quiet area with a store nearby, but about 2 miles away. I needed the house for 2 weeks, and of course, it had to have Wi-Fi. I found a place on a remote island that seemed perfect. It had a large area of land, about 20 acres, and even its own private beach and cove. I contacted the person renting it out through a vacation rental website. They said I could stay there in just 2 days, so I paid the rent and started packing my things. It took about 5 hours to drive from the city to the cottage. The cottage was very isolated, just like they said. In the last 10 minutes of the trip, I didn't see any other houses or cars. The driveway led to a beautiful cottage with a garage beside it, and it had a wonderful view of the sea at the end of the garden. I parked in front and took all my stuff inside. There was a friendly note from the owner, Mr. Smith, saying he had left some milk, butter, and eggs in the fridge, along with some homemade treats for me to try. He said if I needed anything, I could call him, and his number was stuck to the fridge with a magnet. I unpacked and chose the bedroom with a view of the sea. Then I went downstairs, made myself a coffee, and tried some of the treats. Sitting in the living room, I looked out the window at the lovely hills, trees, and coastline. It was exactly what I needed. A bit about me: I'm an author with more than 25 crime novels, but right now, I'm facing the worst writer's block of my career. I booked this place specifically to help with my writing. I enjoy going to quiet places because it helps clear my mind. I was in the middle of writing my latest mystery novel when I suddenly got stuck, and my agent was getting really impatient since we kept missing deadlines. The first night, I slept really well. The next morning, I opened the bedroom curtains to see the garden with a beautiful view of the sea. Surprisingly, the sun was shining, even though it's usually cloudy here. I made myself a bacon sandwich, drank some fresh orange juice, and had a coffee. I spent the next few hours on my novel, adding and deleting different ideas. Feeling like I needed a break, I decided to take a walk. I followed the path through the garden and across the field to reach the private beach. I sat down and looked around, then out to sea. The only boat I saw seemed to be anchored quite far out to the left side of the cove. I used my binoculars, which I had grabbed from the back door before leaving, to look at the boat. I couldn't see anyone on board. The windows were tinted, and it looked about 60 feet long. From the positions of the side windows, I could tell it had 2 lower decks. I walked around the entire cove and then went back up to the house. When I got near the back of the house, I noticed the back door was slightly open. I remembered closing it before, but wasn't completely sure. I thought it was best to be careful as I went back inside. I checked every room to make sure they were empty, which they were, thankfully. So I figured I must not have closed the door properly. I made myself another coffee and sat in the living room, looking out at the garden. That's when I noticed something strange. There was an ashtray on the windowsill and a blue mug that I didn't remember seeing before. It gave me chills. Someone had been here while I was out. They had made themselves a drink, smoked, and had been watching out the window toward the coast. Was it the owner? Why would he come while I was staying here? After that, I checked all my things, my laptop, and valuable items, but everything seemed fine, still in their bags. What's more confusing is that there was no sign that someone was looking for valuables in the house. I decided to call the owner just to see if it was him who came by for some reason, but I tried many times and no one answered. I decided to try again in the morning. It was already 8 p.m. when I finished dinner. Before going to bed, I checked all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked, and I decided to leave the porch light on all night. Then I went to bed, but couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. At 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I passed by the bedroom window, I noticed a slight flicker outside. I could see 2 lights moving around down by the cove. For some crazy reason, I decided to be brave, or maybe just reckless, and go out to investigate. This was private property, so whoever was there had no reason to be. I decided not to use a flashlight in case the people down there saw me coming. As I got closer, I saw the fancy yacht I had seen before through my binoculars. It was now anchored in the cove, and there was only one dim light at the back of the boat. Then I heard people talking in a language I didn't understand. I saw 4 people wearing headlamps. They were next to a boat, and there were several smaller boats and what looked like speedboats nearby. Suddenly, an entire team of law enforcement officers rushed behind me, pointing their weapons at me and telling me to put my hands up and lie flat on the ground. I saw that the people down on the beach had noticed the police and started rushing back to the yacht. It turned out that the police were uncovering a huge secret operation. It was an undercover sting involving millions of dollars worth of stolen goods, and they thought I might be part of it. The authorities had been tipped off that the people on the yacht might be armed. They had been using the cove as a secret meeting spot for some time. It was really well hidden and private, which explained why I hadn't seen anyone around for miles during my entire stay. The operation ended and the criminals were caught. A lot of my friends and family say this should be the perfect inspiration for my next book. When I told the owner what happened, he couldn't believe it. Though, when I asked him to come down and meet me early that morning, he had a suspicious grin on his face. But he claimed he had no idea what was going on, even though it was happening on his land. I was coming back from Connecticut and had to wait for 3 hours in Chicago. It was my first time going so far from home, and I felt really stressed. Chicago was just like I imagined, old and messy. The train station I was at was dirty and crowded. I had some time to kill, so I went outside to see the streets. As I stood there, looking like someone new to the city, a few guys came up to me. They seemed a bit weird, which made me nervous, so I ignored them and bought a hot dog from a street vendor. I decided to wait in the Amtrak waiting area for my train. It seemed like a good spot to sit, so I found a chair towards the back of the room, making sure to position myself with my back against the wall. I noticed a young woman sitting on the floor with her son, who was happily playing with Legos. The boy, who looked about 5 or 6 years old, was wearing a pair of superhero pajamas. I'm always very watchful around kids, even if I don't know them. I've heard too many stories and watched too many true crime videos on social media. As I was looking around the room, I saw an old man enter the waiting area. He wore a black trench coat, and something about him made me feel uneasy. My gut instinct told me to watch him closely. I didn't like the hot dog I bought, so I stood up to throw it away. While I was doing that, there was an announcement on the intercom advising people to report anything suspicious to the authorities. It felt ironic. When I sat back down, I saw the man taking out a camera. Now, you might think he was just looking at photos from a trip or something, but if that had been true, I wouldn't be sharing this story. The man was sitting facing forward, but he had his camera angled to the side, pointing it right at the little boy. I said to the mom, "Ma'am, that man over there is taking pictures of your son." She thanked me for noticing, and I just nodded and told her again to watch her son. Then I stood up and found a police officer. I told him what I saw. The officer went to the old man and told him to hand over the camera for inspection, but what he found sent chills down my spine. The officer discovered not only photos of that kid, but also of other teenage boys and girls. When the officer asked why he was taking those photos, the man didn't give an answer and tried to run away. But because of his age, they caught him easily. I don't know what his intention was for taking pictures of those children, but I'm sure it wasn't good.